It had been years since I'd seen my childhood house. I had spent the majority of my life imagining how it would feel to return, how the familiar perfume of my mother's cooking would fill the air, and the comforting sound of my father's old record player would welcome me. I remembered the laughter at the dinner table and how the sun would set over the grass, casting a golden light on everything I treasured. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened when I turned into the street. The scene in front of me was nothing like I remembered. The house, which used to stand proudly at the corner of the block, was now a hollow shell. The vibrant flowers my mother had planted in the garden had vanished, leaving only a for sale sign that seemed to taunt me. The front porch was empty, except for an elderly rocking chair where my father used to sit on warm days to read the newspaper. I took a deep breath, convincing myself that it was only a moment. Perhaps they were leaving for renovations, or there was a misunderstanding. However, as I neared, the void in my stomach deepened. The windows were bare, with no curtains or signs of life within. It felt off, as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something that would never happen. 3 massive trash bags lay in the middle of the porch, carelessly discarded. My heart dropped as I neared, and my hands trembled as I peeked inside one of them. In the torn black plastic were remnants of my past, my high school textbooks, a damaged picture frame that formerly held a photo of my family at the beach, and an old favorite sweater. These were fragments of myself, pieces of my life, discarded as if they were unimportant. The reality hit me harder than I expected. My parents had kicked me out of their lives, not just physically, but emotionally. My name is Emma Torres, and I had just driven 5 hours from university to see my parents for spring break. I was looking forward to spending time with them and getting caught up on everything I had missed. I even imagined it would be a relaxing and peaceful time, complete with home-cooked meals and late-night chats. Instead, I found myself standing on the porch of my former home, surrounded by the remnants of a life I thought I had. I stood still for a second, clutching my phone. My fingers trembled as I dialed my uncle's number, my last surviving connection. His voice crackled across the line, faint yet detectable. "They moved last week," he said, his voice strained and reluctant. "Didn't they tell you?" "No, they did not inform me. They'd said nothing." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as the weight of his words struck in. The moment was real. They'd left. Worse, they hadn't notified me. No one called or left a message, nothing. I quickly hung up, feeling tightness rise in my chest. I wasn't sure what to do. I contacted my father, hoping to get an explanation. "Dad, the house is empty," I cried, my voice breaking. "My belongings are in trash bags on the porch. What's going on?" There was a little pause on the other end of the phone. Then his distant, impersonal voice came. "We moved. You're an adult now. Deal with it." I couldn't react because the line went dead. My hand fell limply to my side. How did he say that? After years of correspondence, he simply hung up. Then I called my mother's phone. There was no answer. And then there's my younger brother. There was no response either. I even attempted to call my relatives and uncles, but the result was the same. Nothing. It is only stillness. The weight of abandonment suffocated me. My family, on whom I had always relied, had suddenly banished me from their lives. There isn't any warning. There's no reason. There was nothing except a frigid, lonely vacuum where the family I knew had resided. I remained on the porch for what seemed like an eternity, my days roaming across the yard. The maple tree my father and I planted when I was 8 years old grew tall, its branches swaying in the breeze as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Nothing about the house, the family, and my life was the same. As the sun set, leaving long shadows throughout the yard, I felt tears well up in my eyes, but I didn't cry. Not then. I was unable to afford it. Instead, I returned to my car, numb, and began loading trash bags into the trunk. These were my life's relics, and I would not abandon them. Later, I booked into a motel, the unfamiliar bedding creaking beneath me. I put my retrieved possessions around the bed, including old textbooks, winter coats, and a picture frame with a family photo. My heart ached as I stared at the shattered image, recalling a time when everything seemed perfect. That night, while I lay there staring at the ceiling, I decided that if they wanted to delete me, I'd do the same. I'd cut all ties, sever all connections, and rebuild my life in ways that they could never take away. I was uncertain about where to start, but I was certain that I would not allow them to define me. I would become someone they could never control. The days that followed felt like a haze, like I was imprisoned in a fog, unable to tell 1 hour from the next. I spent my time mindlessly pacing the little motel room, trying to make sense of the enormous surge of emotions that had swept over me. The only noise was the air conditioner's continual hum, which served as a backdrop to my quiet. The world beyond the window appeared so distant, like I were watching it from another universe. I had no idea where to go from here, or even what to do next. My life had been turned upside down in the most horrific way, and it felt as if everything I had worked for had been taken away from me in an instant. I'd always seen the house as a haven, a place where I could retreat when the outside world became too much to handle. It had always been there, a constant in my existence. But today, standing in front of that empty house, I knew I needed to leave everything behind. I needed to cut links with the individuals who had once been my family, even if it meant standing alone. Despite their previous attempts, I couldn't let them ruin me. I sat on the edge of the bed, peering at the cracked mirror of the motel room. The person I saw in the mirror was not the same as I had formerly been. I could scarcely recognize myself. My eyes were red from crying, and my face was hollow from worry and lack of sleep. I ran my fingers through my hair, feeling the weight of loneliness press against me. My heart, as well as the physical space, felt empty. But while I sat there, feeling the weight of my grief, something changed within me. I couldn't let myself break apart. I had always taken pride in being the responsible one, the one who kept everything together when times were bad. People could rely on me, and I worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was in order. I was never the sort to let life knock me down and not get back up. And this time, I wasn't going to allow my family's betrayal to break me. I had always wanted more. I had earned it through hard labor and sacrifice, a career in law, the capacity to make a difference. I couldn't allow this setback, their abandonment, to end my story. I was not going to let anyone, particularly my family, define my future. I would forge my own route, even if I had to do it alone. The idea of returning to university crossed my mind, but I soon dismissed it. The dorms were closed for spring break, so I had nowhere else to go. I couldn't go back to my residence. Not after what occurred. Not after they treated me as if I didn't matter. I couldn't go back to the place that once felt like home, but now feels like a jail. I sat there trying to think of a plan. I had a few $100s left over from my savings, enough to get by for a few days, but that wouldn't last. I couldn't afford to stay at a motel for very long. My options were becoming increasingly limited. But then a thought occurred to me, an idea that, while unusual, seemed to be the only plausible one. I grabbed my phone and paused for a moment. It was impossible to contact anyone, especially after what occurred, but I was aware that I needed help. I made a call to Professor Williams. Professor Williams had evolved into something more than a teacher over time. She was my mentor, advisor, and someone I could always go to for assistance. She was the one who encouraged me to pursue a career in law, even when it seemed impossible. When I told her about my predicament, I could sense sympathy as well as understanding. She wasn't just offering me a place to stay, she was giving me a chance to regroup and find some serenity after everything that had transpired. "Emma," she replied softly, "I am so sad to hear what has occurred. You can stay with me till the dormitories reopen. I have a guest room, and you require a place to rest. Come by whenever you are available." I felt a surge of appreciation sweep over me, but it was accompanied by a strange feeling of uneasiness. I had never been one to seek help, especially from someone outside of my family. I had always thought I should be able to handle things on my own, but at that point, I realized I had no other option. I couldn't stay at the motel anymore. I couldn't bear the loneliness of my life alone, especially when someone offered me a lifeline. I packed my possessions into the small duffel bag I had left, trying to fit everything into the small space. I didn't have much, just a few clothing changes, a couple of textbooks, and a broken picture frame that formerly held a family photo. I grabbed my car keys and exited the motel room, shutting the door behind me. The streets felt empty today, as if everything had lost its vitality, but I forced myself to keep moving forward. Professor Williams's residence was in a peaceful neighborhood, away from the bustle of college life. It was a lovely Victorian home, complete with wide windows, a wraparound porch, and a flower-filled garden. The familiar smell of books and old furniture welcomed me as soon as I walked inside. The house was warm and welcoming, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't have to be strong in this situation. I could just be. As I looked around the room, I reflected on how far I had come. I had transformed from a teenager who had always adhered to rules and tried to please her family to a woman who was now learning to be self-sufficient. Despite the uncertain road ahead, I was certain that I would not let my family's betrayal define me. I planned to create something tangible for myself. I looked at my phone and noticed that I had a few missed calls, all from my parents. I decided not to check the mail at that time. I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Instead, I set down my phone and focused on the future, which was mine to shape. The days after my arrival at Professor Williams' house felt like an odd blend of peace and purpose. For the first time in a long time, I was not alone in that empty motel room with my thoughts. The Victorian mansion, with its creaky floors and bright, sunlight-filled windows, became a haven in its own right. It was quiet but alive, and as I relaxed into the guest room, I realized I could breathe properly for the first time in days. Professor Williams never forced me to discuss topics I was avoiding, but she would occasionally offer me a cup of tea in a living room and allow the conversation to flow naturally. We would discuss my law school work, the cases that piqued my attention, and even the tales of previous students she had mentored. It wasn't as if she was ignoring the elephant in the room. She just allowed me space to process things on my own schedule. I thanked her for her patience. But at night, as the house became silent and the only sound was the distant buzz of traffic, my thoughts would eventually return to what had transpired. The haunting image of the mansion, which had once been a symbol of my upbringing, seemed like a distant memory now. My memories of my family, the laughs we enjoyed at the dinner table, and the trips we went to the beach had become almost dreamlike. How could they leave me behind without a second thought? But I couldn't let myself get caught up in the bitterness. I'd worked too hard to let that get to me. I knew I needed to keep pushing forward, even if it meant starting over. I dedicated the following few days to my study. I studied cases, read textbooks, and took notes late into the night. The Safe Space Initiative, a notion I had floated in a moment of exasperation, began to take shape in my thoughts. It was no longer a dream. It was a genuine endeavor that I could build to make a difference. The initiative would offer housing advocacy to students and low-income families facing eviction or other housing concerns. It would provide them with not only legal aid, but also a sense of empowerment, allowing them to fight back against the forces that wanted to push them away. I understood how it felt to be abandoned and discarded, since I had been there before. I didn't want anyone else to feel like that. I wasn't sure where to begin. I didn't have much money and didn't know anyone who could help. But as I worked with Professor Williams, she introduced me to resources and community members who could help. I started networking with other law students, teachers, and even local activists who shared my enthusiasm for social justice. One evening, while I sat in Professor Williams' lovely kitchen, I told her about the project I intended to launch. Her eyes widened as I mentioned it, and she nodded attentively. "Emma, I think you have something here," she replied, her tone warm with praise. "It is ambitious, but it is just what is required. You've been through hell, and you're using your sorrow to do something significant. That is quite powerful." Her remarks inspired me. I started writing a proposal for the Safe Space Initiative, explaining its objectives, mission, and potential impact. I worked on it late into the night, the desk lamp's faint light spreading long shadows across the room. As I worked, I became increasingly optimistic about the future and what I could achieve. I wasn't just developing a profession, I was also creating a legacy, a way to ensure that individuals who had been abandoned, like me, had a chance to fight back. While working on a research article for my constitutional law class, I received an email from Riverton Legal. It was an invitation for an interview to explore a possible internship. I applied a few weeks ago, not expecting anything to come of it, but now the timing looked perfect. When I called Professor Williams to tell her the news, she was as excited as I was. "I knew they'd see your potential," she stated. "You're exactly the kind of person they need." I did my best to prepare for the interview by going over my notes and preparing my responses. The prospect of entering a legal firm was scary, but I knew it was a step I needed to take if I wanted to make a genuine impact in the world. I wasn't just looking for work, I was trying to make a name for myself in a world that had abandoned me. Despite my best efforts to concentrate on reconstructing my life, phone calls from my relatives continued to torment me. They persisted, like shadows that refused to vanish. The missed voicemails, guilt-laced text messages, and agonizing pleas just kept coming. However, I had already made a decision. I would not allow them to return. I wasn't ready to let them back in just yet. I wouldn't allow them to return even after everything. But as much as I tried to ignore them, there was an undercurrent of interest, a part of me that still wanted answers. I needed to know why they had abandoned me, why they had treated me like an afterthought, as if my years of hard work, love, and devotion were meaningless to them. Despite my best efforts to ignore them, the sensation of abandonment persisted. My phone rang one evening while I was sitting in Professor Williams' living room examining case files for the Safe Space Initiative. It was a number that I did not recognize. I was about to send it to voicemail, but something stopped me. As I answered the phone, I was overcome with a peculiar sensation of inevitability. It was from Aunt Lucia, one of the few family members I still communicated with. "Emma, I know you're probably not going to want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something." Her voice was trembling and barely audible. I I didn't think you'd ever speak to any of us again, but your parents, they're distraught. They've been attempting to contact you. They are sorry, Emma. They made a major error." Her words struck me deeply. My heart raced as her voice became choked with emotion. A part of me wanted to hang up and finish the conversation right then. But another part of me, still seeking closure, wanted to know why they had done this to me. "They're sorry?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What comes after everything? After they left me with nothing? Not even a word?"
after they sold our home and didn't tell me, and now they wish to apologize? Why now? Lucia paused, as if looking for the proper words. It is complicated, Emma. Your father has lost his job. Your mother, she has been battling. They struggled to seek help, and when situations escalated, they became overwhelmed. They never ceased loving you. They never wanted to harm you. My emotions raged within me. I wanted to sympathize with them, but my own grief made it hard to relate. They had made their decisions, which I could never entirely forgive. I don't know if I'll ever forgive them, Lucia, I admitted gently. Not now. Perhaps eventually, but not yet. The conversation ended quickly, and I sat in the silence of Professor Williams' home, my heart heavy with contradictory emotions. Alongside my still hot anger was a faint ache and a yearning for the family I had lost. But no matter how much I longed to go back in time, I knew I couldn't. They had made their decisions, as had I.
Despite the lingering anguish and the calls from my relatives that continued to disrupt my life, I couldn't allow them to impede my development. The Safe Space Initiative, which had once seemed like a distant dream, was becoming a reality. We had obtained the first round of money from local organizations and private donors. The project was expanding, and I could see the effect it was having on the neighborhood. We were assisting families facing eviction by providing them not only with legal assistance, but also with a sense of empowerment. We gave them a chance to fight back. After a long week of meetings and interviews, I was surprised to get an email. It came from Riverton Legal, a law company to which I had applied for a summer internship months prior. I had almost forgotten about it, so seeing the subject line caused my heart to skip a beat. The email stated, "We would like to offer you an internship position." I sat there in startled silence for a time, then read the email again. This was an incredible opportunity. This opportunity was significant not only for my career, but also for everything I had dedicated my efforts to. It was an opportunity to establish something larger, to make a name for myself in the legal sector. I called Professor Williams right away to tell her about the news, and I could sense the pride in her voice as she congratulated me. "I knew they'd see your potential," she stated. "You've earned this, Emma." I felt a sense of accomplishment, but I was also conflicted. I was entering a new universe that I had created for myself, but I was still worried about my family. Their phone calls had not stopped. They continued coming, first apologizing, then becoming increasingly desperate. They wanted to reconnect, to have me back, but I didn't really need them anymore. I forged my own way. I felt proud as I stepped into the legal office on my first day. I wasn't just beginning an internship, I was taking another step towards my future. I had transformed into a different person. I was becoming the woman I had always desired to be, strong, independent, and unabashedly myself. The Safe Space Initiative grew over the coming months, and so did my sense of purpose. We helped even more families, and the community took note. We won additional funding, grew our volunteer network, and even began collaborating with local businesses to provide financial assistance to individuals in greatest need. And as my time at Riverton Legal progressed, I felt myself getting more secure, assured of my place in the world. I had fashioned something meaningful from the ruins of my history. I'd found my family, not through blood relatives, but through the individuals I chose to surround myself with. My colleagues, customers, and safe space volunteers, these were the people who believed in me, supported me, and demonstrated that family was more than simply blood. It was about connecting, trusting, and sharing values. As I considered the future, I realized that regardless of what happened to my family, I had already established the life I had always desired. Nothing, not even the past, could take that from me.